you have to make it as easy as possible for the distribution folks to get a new product in. So when you're launching a new product and it's an electric product, you know very well it's always, you're gonna hit doubtful people that look at it as like, I like my diesel, why do I want to get an electric? But if you also change the whole product they own, then it's even harder. So our approach has always been adapt to things people know and are successful to use.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in. Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another day, another episode. We are here today. We have Marc from a unique offering. Wanted to kind of take a little bit of a tangent. We've had several unique conversations. We actually met Marc and the Conmet team at the ACT Expo, and we're kind of intrigued by their infrastructure, like kind of what they're doing in the electrification space. And so had to put it in the plans to kind of have Marc or people from his team come on and kind of spotlight some of the uniqueness behind electrified refrigeration, trucking, and that space. So all that being said, Marc, thank you for being on today. Give us an introduction to yourself, and then we can obviously dive in and learn more about electrified refrigeration.
Hey, well, good afternoon, and thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, glad that you came over to our booth at the Expo. That was a very busy show, so there were a lot of things to look at, but we also had a lot of things to share. And one of it was our refrigerated trailers. But a little bit about me. So I joined Conmet about 3 years ago to lead a newly made division, business unit in electrification of transport, leveraging some of the core strength of Conmet. I have a past in electrification since 2015. So I worked a lot in chargers, in vehicle to grid, and how do you integrate all these electric vehicles to the grid, which is a big subject today. And then discovered the commercial vehicle industry, where we have lots to do in electrification. And super exciting because there's so many things to do, so many, everywhere you look at, there's opportunities. So it's a great moment, I think, to be in this area.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what we've learned, as being in this industry and talking and networking with others, we have found that the space is such a baby space that a lot of people are doing a lot of really unique things in the space that are kind of cutting edge new technologies, and everybody's figuring out how to find their niche in the market. And so obviously, you think EV, you think, oh, the Tesla car, and like what that provides to the market. But electrification has many, many different heads, and obviously commercialized applications. Coming up next week, I believe we'll be spotlighting some new developments coming up with the advanced air mobility space, where you're electrifying the skies. And you can electrify trucking, and there's a ton of different ways to kind of spin this new evolving technology, and you guys have a very unique entrance into that space.
Yeah, thank you. And I think everybody's got a different problem as well. So when we look at a number of different use cases inside trucking is not one use case. There are a lot of different use cases in trucking, which makes it complex. And you need to have a flexible product in order to be able to make the business case work, but also to make sure that whatever mission you're trying to resolve with the trucking industry, it has to happen 100% all the time.
Absolutely. So
And
thanks for the introduction. Give us a generalized overview on the product that we are spotlighting today.
right, so maybe I should start a little bit on who is Conmet. We're not a well-known brand, but we do a lot of parts for the commercial vehicle industry. So we've been in existence for 60 years. We're celebrating our 60 years this year. Traditionally, we've been doing castings, so aluminum castings, which help lightweight vehicles, very important in electrification today. We make plastic, now things, outdoor plastics like bumpers, doors, but also dashboards for these Class 8 tractors. And we also make the wheel ends. So the wheel ends is what enable the wheel to turn on a truck. It's a bit more complex than on the car because it has to bear a lot of weight and go many more miles. And because of that innovation, what we've done is we've incorporated electric motors inside the wheels. And the idea is to be able to electrify transport from the wheel end, which is more efficient, it's more lightweight. You have no transmission going down the center of these trucks or trailers. And so we think that's the future. So that's the innovation that we started through basically a long history of Conmet working in the commercial vehicle industry. We are a trusted supplier. We get master quality awards from our typical customers, which are the Daimlers, Volvo, Packard, Navistar of these worlds. So we're well ingrained in the trucking industry, but we also provide to the trailer OEMs. And our position there of quality and trust has enabled us to launch this innovation in a better way.
Absolutely.
So can you break down a bit is the trailer truck agnostic? So whether it's an electric truck, a hydrogen truck, a diesel truck, that trailer is going to be electrified for any of those different cabs.
Look at you, Chris, bringing in our hydrogen for the day. Look at you. I'm so proud of you.
I didn't want to leave that out. I know Jesse is passionate about that, and so yeah, is that the case where does it matter what cab is on the front of it?
We want our product to be as flexible as possible. So whatever tractor you're going to pull this with, it's going to work. So you can pull this with a diesel, a hydrogen, or a battery electric tractor as well. So maybe I should explain a little bit how the trailer works. And you can see the diagram of the trailer behind me. The big blue box you see at the front is called a transport refrigeration unit. So that's called a TRU. What the TRU does is provides basically cold air inside the insulated box of the trailer. That cold air is usually generated by a compressor. And up to now, that compressor is pretty much driven by a diesel engine. And that's typically a 4-piston diesel engine, 2.5 liter size. They pollute a lot because those diesel engines have very little mitigation of exhaust. So up to now, until fairly recently, there's been raw exhaust out into the air. So high particulate, high NOx. And so if you can prevent that diesel engine from running and replace it by electric and electric compressors, then that's the right way to go. So what we've done is we've put electric motors inside the wheels. They act as generators. We have a fairly small battery, that's the orange box with power electronics, that's in the center of the trailer. And that, ideally, what you do is you fill that battery from the grid before you leave the distribution center. And that battery can then be topped up by the generation in the wheels. So mission number one here is that the ice cream cannot go cold inside. And I take the example of ice cream, but it could be medicine, it could be vaccines, whatever you want inside those trailers. There are many use cases. You have to get to the grocery store at the right temperature.
So just to back up just a second,
yep.
Do you have, I'm sure you probably do you have statistics on because people may not understand, the average consumer may not understand the gravity of the size of this industry. Do you have a number or a ballpark on like the amount of refrigerated trailers that your market is?
So across North America, there are 450,000 refrigerated trailers. That's ballpark the same actually as school buses, sorry. So we're trying to electrify school buses across the nation. It's the same thing with electric trailers. It's a huge size and it's only increasing. So about 45 to 50,000 new refrigerated trailers, they also call these reefers, are built every year. So it's a big market. They're very technically varied for the use case. So if you're going to a supermarket, very often it's a 53-foot trailer. If you're delivering basically to a restaurant around your neighborhood, it's usually a shorter trailer because you can't maneuver that big 53-footer around the street. So there's lots of different types of trailers. Some have side doors, some don't. So actually, when you start looking at the details of these trailers, there's a lot of scaling and the variation of how they're built.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
know.
I think a lot of people go to the grocery store and they can pick up a gallon of milk, but they don't understand the process of getting these goods and services moved around. And that's, I mean, like you were saying, I mean, it could be to your local grocery store, it could be vaccines, it could be medicine, it could be all sorts of things, but produce and things like that to that nature are probably one of the larger consumers of it. But the produce and grocery type items is a gigantic amount of our transport, and so that's definitely a huge gap that's in the market. That obviously you see those trailers that are plugged up that are running the diesel or whatever to get the refrigeration, but this is a solution that kind of makes that a sustainable fix for that.
Right. No, you're
Yeah,
quite right.
in my 9 to 5, we see a lot of trailers that do the biomed companies out here in the Bay Area. We have so many of them, and the refrigerated trucks are critical to what they're moving around. And then a surprising one that most people probably don't think about is flowers. A lot of flowers come from overseas and have to be refrigerated and kept in a refrigerated state to get them to last. And so I think food and beverage and restaurants is certainly one that everybody's familiar with, but there's probably more refrigerated trucks than people realize out there on the road. And are these things that can be put into existing box trucks that food purveyors are using, or would they buy a whole new trailer from you guys in these scenarios? I'm thinking like U.S. Foods and those types of places that are big distributors and use a lot of them. How's that work?
You have to make it as easy as possible for the distribution folks to get a new product in. So when you're launching a new product and it's an electric product, very well, it's always, you're going to hit doubtful people that look at it as like, I like my diesel. Why do I want to get an electric? But if you also change the whole product they own, then it's even harder. So our approach has always been adapt to things people know and are successful to use. So, for example, the TRU up front is a standard carrier vector TRU. It's one they've always been buying. And what we do, we plug into it electrically and activate the electric side of the vector unit. So that's standard. Then you look at the trailer itself. We like to use as well a fairly standard suspension if we can, so that it's a well-used suspension. We work with the trailer manufacturers up front to make sure that the battery is safely hung underneath the trailer so the cross members are strong enough. So we work at doing that up front so that if you're a customer, you took the example of US Foods. If you're US Foods and you want to buy one of our equipped trailers, you buy your trailer from your regular OEM. You ask the OEM, can I have the Conmet option on it? And then they know what to do. They will pre-drill holes. They will put wiring through it. We'll provide them everything they need so that it's easier afterwards to adapt and roll out.
So what is with the solution? What is the battery size that comes attached to that standard, like the image that you're showing?
Yeah. So it's a fairly small battery, and it's 45 kilowatt hour on the next generation coming out this winter. And we thrive to make it as small as possible, because if you may put a battery that's too big, then you have to take goods out of the trailer because you're going to hit the max gross weight of the vehicle. So we have 45 kilowatt hours that allows us to be as light as possible. And that's where the powerful wheel generation comes in. It's like once you go through the battery, you kick in the generation to make sure you can survive the day. So for some, depending on the use case that we've done, so we've been commercializing this for a little while. So we've got a fleet out there of our first generation product that's on the road. And so we've been public with fleets like Cisco, like Penske, UNFI in putting these on the road. So we've been able to gather data over the past 2 years of all these different use cases. Some deliveries are literally 60 miles around the block in LA. And that can actually span over a long amount of hours. Other deliveries we've had is across country. They pick up in LA, they drop off in Kansas, they go to Florida and come back. But because of the wheel generation, we can always provide enough energy to go. So having a device that's flexible like that, that can do short or long deliveries is the key thing. So light battery so that you don't have to take goods out, because if you have to take goods out, then you're going to need a second trailer to make your delivery. And at the end of the day, so you have to make money. So if you hamper their operations with an electric product, they're going to throw it right back at you. So you have to be flexible.
So with the
On
45 kilowatts to run the refrigerant, how long can a trailer sit there on the battery? And if you're driving, then how much regeneration do you have to extend that range?
Yeah, so the use of the TRU is going to depend, of course, how you use it. So on average, I would say, 8 kilowatt per hour is typically the usage. Of course, if you close all the doors and you never open them until you get the destination on a cold refrigerated dock, you're going to use way less. If you're the type of delivery where you're in the street to a restaurant, I open all the doors, I'm in LA, it's 95 degrees, then that battery is going to be depleted faster. So that's the trick of the game, is making sure the use cases work well. This is why all these trailers are equipped with full telematics. We know exactly what's going on. The users knows what's going on. We share all that information with the operators so they can see, hey, this is what happened yesterday. And you know better than I do, people forget to plug in. And so that's where the flexibility of the product and the ability to generate on road at the end is very key to providing this. So for your information, our motors are high powered. We can go peak 160 kilowatt. So for example, when you're braking, you can put in as much regen as you want into that battery. So
that was going to be my follow-up question was, in the residential side or like the passenger vehicle side, like my truck, I never use the brakes ever because my regeneration, I know how to feather the accelerator and basically be able to stop at a red light. Obviously, with a truck with a lot of mass, that is a factor. But with this type of solution, does that then better protect the braking system of the vehicle based on how aggressive that regeneration is, or is that regeneration light enough to where it doesn't make a meaningful difference to the brakes?
No, you're totally right. I think my EV is like 6 years old and I never changed the brake pads and they're fine on it. But I think with a truck is a bit different. You've got 60, max 80,000 pounds there on the road. So that braking is mostly taken by the tractor today, but the trailer has brakes as well. What we provide is a bit of an extra sort of braking ability through the electric motor, but it's not significant enough to be able to stop the whole tractor and trailer together with that weight.
My question is, does it lighten, I guess, the burden on the braking systems compared to a traditional trucking system?
It does, but it's not, you're not going to feel it that much. The drivers, I mean, all the drivers that have experienced it don't really feel any difference on the braking pattern there.
Yeah, it's not going to be like a Jake brake where you could throw it on and instantly feel the compression. Now, one question I have, we've been working with multiple companies, and now I think everybody in the trucking industry has an EV truck, whether it be Nikola or Kenworth, everybody. So when you look at your trailer, obviously you have the weight of the battery, but you have these axles that can produce power. Have you considered building a trailer that doesn't have a reefer or traditional delivery trailer, but you have two axles that deliver the regenerative braking as well as the additional power back into the battery source of a class 7 or 8 truck?
We've done some testing there, and I think what's key for us is developing that over time to see what we can bring to market and how we can help electrification of tractors. So nearly half of our customers are actually using them behind battery electric tractors today. And they see that as a great way to have the whole rig absolutely decarbonized. It is fantastic. It's so silent as well. So you don't have any noise from the TRU. You don't have any noise from the tractor. The drivers like it. It's a dream for them. But when you go back to how do you impact the battery of the tractor is not so much on the regen. We can put these motors in propulsion mode as well eventually. And then maybe we can imagine priority number one again, get the refrigeration right. when you finish your delivery, you can imagine that you can put energy back into the motors to help the tractor save energy all the way home. That's definitely something we've seen. And even on a diesel truck, you can get quite a lot of savings there on diesel if you do propulsion. We're not commercializing that immediately. I think there's some challenges there ahead of everyone on the tractor being able to do propulsion. So once we finalize all the R&D around it, we'll be excited to launch that. And you're talking about dry vans as well. Can we do that with dry vans, Jesse? Absolutely, eventually. I think that all depend on what the use case is. Every state has a different cost of electrons and diesel. So your business case is very state per state, but that's definitely interesting in the future.
Well, that also makes me think one of the conversations we've had with our F-150 Lightnings, and we've had other people who pull vehicles with their F-150 Lightnings. Yep. And one of the questions there is, okay, can we have a trailer that uses that? And I think that's kind of another question. Are you looking at building smaller trailers for this?
So right now, we don't really build the trailer ourselves, right? We provide a technology that's fully electric for anybody that wants to include it in their trailers. So we'll be working with OEMs because that's really what Conmet does the best, is work upfront with the OEMs at integrating these pieces with their products. So yes, we're definitely talking actually with totally different type of use cases of trailers that might be more in the recreation area and others to see what we can do in the future.
On the cost side of things, do you have a sense for how much more expensive and how long it takes to get the savings from not using that extra diesel? Have you guys kind of figured that out? And then does the trailer qualify for any? I know California has a lot of different incentives and a lot of things that they try to do out here. Does this trailer itself qualify in the way that some of the vehicles do for different incentives and rebates?
So on the experience side, Chris, we've got about over 330,000 miles now driven commercially with these. So that's about 2,200 real deliveries with real refrigerated goods in. So I think overall we've saved probably above 10,000 gallons of gas from TRU gas, that is. And so that's been beneficial for all the operators as well. They're saving on maintenance as well, because if the diesel is not running, you're not going to have to do maintenance on that diesel. It's all electric driven through the compressor. When it gets to incentives, now everybody would like incentives. There's no question. The difficulty about a trailer, it's not registered, or typically CARB doesn't look at it as a vehicle. It's looked as a off-road vehicle. That's just legacy classification. So you cannot get, for example, some of the tax rebates you can get on your Tesla. So, you can get through your taxes and the IRS, I think 7,500 or something like that on the vehicle. You cannot get that on the trailer today. You can look at special EPA grants that they will roll out for projects around electrifying a distribution center, for example. And then when it gets to CARB, they're looking at bringing in regulation for these refrigerated trailers by 2026. So that's going to be interesting to follow. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the purchases is linked to the regulations coming, and everybody wants to test this and try it out so they know what to do when the regulation falls. And incentives would be certainly welcome to help these fleets, which don't make huge margins, but would like these fleets need to get into this, and it's a tough business for them.
Yeah, I think that's always the big challenge with electrifying things, and it's the first thing that comes up is there's usually a higher upfront cost. And I think one of the things that we run into in my 9 to 5 is with big companies, these are different budget categories. So buying a bunch of trailers might be a CapEx, budgetary area, whereas the fuel is an operational one. And it doesn't sound like it would make a difference, but I've learned as we've looked at electrifying our fleet that the way these things are done and the way things are depreciated and the way different CapEx budgets are done, that it's not always as simple as a math calculus that it would seem to be, that, money is money, whether you're paying for it up front or whether you're doing it throughout the year. But it really does pose a challenge for some of these companies, so that what is kind of the added cost, the initial added cost? Could you put a percentage on it? And, does it typically break even within 2 years? I mean, I guess it's got to depend on how much they're traveling. Obviously, it's kind of vary.
You're totally right. The use case is fully dependent on how you're going to recover and what the ROI is around this product. So we definitely add to the costs of the trailer significantly. The ROI today, I think, is a bit too far out compared to where we want to be. So you're talking probably, depending on use case, you could be above 6 years, 10 years, which is sometimes beyond the lease time that these fleets are going to lease the vehicles. So we need to bring ROIs down to 3 to 5 years, which is the horizon we're looking at. But before you do that, the supply chain has got to follow. So battery prices have got to come down. You're very familiar, of course, about the mandate coming along for batteries to be made in the United States. We've got plans to build, and that's going to take time before those battery costs come down here in the US. So it's something we're definitely keen on pushing the supply chain heavily, and we're looking forward to that. I think it's super exciting that we want to create an infrastructure in this country to be able to build everything electric, but it's going to take a lot of energy and time as well.
Now, one of the aspects that we work on is virtual power plants and vehicle to grid or vehicle to X. You're talking about the ROI on these trailers. Is there a consideration if you're a fleet manager, for example, and you have 15 of these trailers sitting in your yard, and it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Texas, for example, and the price per kilowatt goes up to $1,100 or $1,200? Is there an option yet that where you can utilize your fleet as that virtual power plant and sell back to the grid on bidirectional systems, to where you could put that towards your ROI? Because obviously, if you can sell that 40 kilowatts back to the grid at a very high rate, you're going to have a benefit there.
Yeah, that's certainly something you could look at. I don't think right now the distribution centers are necessarily set up to do that. And some of them are really struggling at getting the grid connection. So a lot of what we focus right now is making that energy available for the refrigeration and make sure you get that right. Then afterwards, certainly there's things we couldn't imagine there. We've also focused on getting the battery as small as you can. One, to lower the cost, to lower the weight. So it doesn't mean necessarily we have tons of energy left, not like you might have in a BEV, a Class 8 truck. You can have, the e-Cascadia, I think, has got 450 kilowatt hours or something close to that. So you might have a lot of energy left into that. With our smaller batteries, yeah, if you aggregate multiple different trailers together, you might have something there. I think that's in the future. It could be possible to do that. You could also think about, what are emergency situations where your refrigerated DC loses power? Can all the trailers help keep the DC cool or things like that? So there could be other ways to look at those schemes as well without going out to the grid.
Now, you mentioned that these trailers can be charged just like a regular vehicle. Do they charge with CCS systems, and what is the maximum kilowattage that you can use to charge the trailer?
So our Gen 2 system is going to come with a new scheme where we're actually going to use the shore power AC 480 volt plug. And that's because it's available. It's available usually in 2 different positions at the distribution centers. It's available at the wall when you come up to the loading dock, and it is also available in the yard where the trailer usually goes to sit while it waits for a tractor to pull it out. And that's sort of a 22 kilowatt connection that we'll have there. So it allows you to charge this battery within 2 hours. But what's important for fleets is fast turnaround. So getting it quickly recharge and back on the road. And that's where our wheel generation helps too, because very often our trailer can come back to the depot fully charged because of the wheel generation. And that can be a choice for the fleet if they want to send it back on the road immediately. Some fleets sit all night. In that case, you got plenty of time to charge them at the time of day that suits the best for the grid.
Awesome.
Yeah, the dwell time on that stuff. No, sorry, Josh.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
Yeah, the dwell time on that stuff is really important. And 480, I know for the electric tugs that we have that move the trailers around the yard, those are also 480. So that power does sit at these yards where they're implemented, which is really nice to have that be kind of a common thing. And I think the big benefit to this really is just the amount of time some of these trucks sit idled. And
Yeah.
because a lot of times when you're transporting these things across large miles across the country, they often exceed what the driver is allowed to drive in a day. And
Mhm.
then they're sitting there just that idle stuff, whether it's at a truck stop or some of these places that have at the actual shipyards themselves when they're loading them out of the container ships, right? And there's big long lines of trucks, and they even when there's nothing in the trucks, you have to keep that thing refrigerated even when it's empty. So there's all of that time too that it's I'd love to see it scale where because obviously everything with scale brings the price down, and so it's this chicken and the egg thing where yeah you need the suppliers, you need the scale to get the cost down, you need the cost to get down to get the demand. So it's great and it's bold what you guys are doing, going out there and making that step.
You've got to be selective initially. Our product is pretty flexible, so we can do the long haul, but the difficulty is, yes, if your driver has to stop 8 hours, then it's a challenge. If you have two drivers, then that works better. So we get two drivers on certain routes. So working up front with a customer, making sure, hey, you've got to know this is electric. Make sure you have the right use case for it. Yeah, fortunately, you're sitting 3 hours outside of a port waiting for paperwork to let you in. That is difficult as well. And those need to be taken in consideration.
Well, one of our projects that we're working on is electrification and basically a hydrogen and a megawatt charging system that would allow goods and services from Tennessee go to other states, whether it be Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, down to New Orleans. So what it sounds like to me is this could easily be a consideration that if that is a truck stop, that it will be a traditional stop, that there needs to also be consideration for that type of voltage for people to be able to charge up their trailers as well for reefers and have a spot that's specifically to where if you're charging your truck, you can also plug in and charge your reefer while you're there. So these are things that are good for us to hear because it allows us to say, okay, what's going to allow these trucking companies to make the best return on their investment. And, we need to be the ones that can help service the trailers as well, if that's what they need.
And you're saying one of the largest players in the space right now working for electrification of their gas stations is Love's and Pilot. And so it would make logical sense for them to put the passenger vehicle chargers in. But in addition to that, it would also make sense that they might also make a consideration for the necessary infrastructure to go ahead and add in some ability to recharge the reefers while they're there, because most of these drivers would go to one of those type of destinations for the night or whatever their stop is, and that might be a consideration for a push and those type of refueling stations because they're the first user. And then obviously Jesse and I have this vision for a more sustainable truck stop as a whole that can refuel the actual tractor and and the trailer and the hydrogen and do all of it. But that's where for now, a Pilot and a Love's going in and retrofitting their site to have the appropriate charge to actually refuel the reefer itself might be a wise move.
I agree with you, and thanks for bringing that up because I've been hopping through the same type of message. There's corridors being built across the nation now, and we're thinking about the CCS plug, but nobody's thinking about the TRU and all these refrigerated fleets. What are they going to do? Because they might be able to stop and charge, but then they've got to wait probably half an hour to charge. And what do they do with the refrigeration? So being able to plug it in is key. Then it's all about grid capacity, right? Do you have the right grid capacity to bring that to that Love's or that Pilot is going to be the key thing.
And at the end of the day, if you're dealing with a charging station, adding on the ability to have what is considered a lower charging function through that type of charger is an easy add-on. But these gas stations should, and most of them that are getting this electric infrastructure in place wouldn't be overly exerting themselves to add in the appropriate ports to support those type of that type of charging while they're there as well.
No, that's the challenge we all have here is how do you bring enough infrastructure and enough megawatts to each of these stops, which typically are in the middle of nowhere close to an intersection, to a highway, but not where population is and not where the grid has decided to deliver. So those are the challenges for electrification of long haul. But before you go to long haul, there's a lot of short haul that can happen very successfully with Class 8 tractors and trailers. And what we tend to forget, and we tend to focus on the difficult use cases, but let's do the easy ones first. And these trailers can be super successful in deliveries that we know work. Same with electric tractors, electrify all that first, and then eventually we can get to the long haul, which is going to be a tougher solution.
We're dealing with the same thing in advanced air mobility. I mean, everybody wants to get a plane to fly from Los Angeles to New York. But yet, I mean, the first immediate use case for this advanced air mobility and the airplanes that are coming out is, how about we get from LAX over to the stadium and, little puddle hop, airplane rides, air taxis, package deliveries within 50 miles. Like, the short term is the immediate use case for that. And then obviously long term is one that's going to get built out. And a lot of the trucking industry does happen, on a larger scale, but a lot of it does happen on a more localized scale. Yeah. So there's a use case for every product. And, we were having that discussion around the trucking, the hydrogen and the electric trucks, they don't have to be designed to go across the nation, especially with the actual tractors. You can, in fact, do a loop with those vehicles, meaning that you take it 200 miles and back, and you either drop the load and then hook it up to a diesel to take it to the second leg, or you could just have a shorter circuit from a port to a main city and use that use case for the renewable, and then from that port be able to distribute to the main city and have that as a sustainable route. So you can have sustainable routes around towns or between two close cities, but that's where the longer term stuff is a more slow burn.
And that's where we think the wheel generation is key. It's like being able to re-up that battery when it's needed, make sure mission number one, get the refrigeration right, is always achieved, is key. And we've had trailers going over 5,000 miles without any issues there. It's just a matter of, you've got to have the right use case, plug them in if you can. If you cannot, then just have to be aware of the battery size.
Well, and I do want to mention too that Carrier is one of your people you're working with, and obviously people that are in Tennessee understand Carrier has a huge manufacturing facility here. So it's always nice too to see companies that is in our state participating and creating opportunities like this as well.
Shout out Carrier, man. They do my home air conditioning and my warehouse at work. So good shout out to Carrier, man. Great company.
Definitely a giant in this space, and we really like the technology they originally had on this vector unit that's in front of the trailers, the ability to go full electric on it or diesel, but the ability for us to plug into the full electric side of it is really key, and it's a trusted product across the refrigeration industry. So again, you've got to lower the barriers to adoption, make your product as easy, as flexible as possible for fleets.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as one of those barriers, kind of going back to the cost side of things, just for the nerd audience, are you using the LFP batteries or NCM? What are you guys doing from the battery side of things?
So from the battery side of things, we're using an NMC technology that's both heated and cooled. And what we've done, we started this business in 2018, really. So we've been doing a lot of tests, and we've understood how these trailers, go all the way to Phoenix, sit in the Mojave Desert under super high temperatures, but also trek up to Canada, and all of a sudden it's winter up there. And you need to have a battery that's super flexible in terms of these temperature changes, and going without the heating and cool system is not the right way to go. We started with NMC because it also has the right lightweight technology, and because we have a high power output from the motor at the max of 160 kilowatts, we also need what's called a high C-rate battery. So the ability to put in a lot of electrons in a short amount of time in that battery is key to us. So we've started with NMC. We're looking at the new technologies in the future. LFP is a bit heavier, but it's a technology we could move into. the system is agnostic of the battery size at the end of the day. The key thing is managing the power electronics and the flow of energy in and out. And then the battery is a battery. We can change that over time.
Well, there you go.
But there's definitely some specificities that you get here. The other interesting thing on our use case compared to an EV, yeah, if you're driving your Lightning down the road, you're going to have high energy out into the motors. As soon as you regen, you've got high energy back in. You do a trip on the highway, you're going to heat up your battery. You stop at a fast charger, that's going to heat up the battery because you're fast charging it. So an EV can be under a lot of duress there, whereas our batteries are managed very differently. The TRU has a much lower consumption. Max rate might be 20 kilowatts. There's nothing for an EV. So we think the batteries are going to actually last longer than typically predicted with this type of use case. So that's also an advantage for us there.
So do you see the ability here before, do you have a vehicle out or a trailer that's already been directly hooked up to a truck versus having the battery for the reefer system? So say I have a Nikola truck that's all electric. Without the battery, obviously you have more room and you can charge the battery of the Nikola truck, and then the truck itself can connect to the reefer. Is that system being considered for when you have an all-electric truck to kind of remove the battery from the equation and then use the truck's much larger battery system for it?
That might be a future implementation, but that has a lot of difficult variants around it. One of the big difficulties is how do you bring high voltage? Every manufacturer actually uses a little bit of a different high voltage level, and you bring that to a standard trailer that's behind it. You want to be able, some fleets own their tractors, some fleets don't, and then you don't know who's coming to pull your trailer.
That's a
So
great,
that ability to plug in and out is not easy. Plus, there's a safety and security. You can't just plug in 650 volts right like that. You've got to shut everything down, power everything up. So and then the flexibility of the cables is not necessarily there either. So we need to work on that. I think that's quite a long way away from it right now. I think this technology that you can plug in, plug out any type of tractor right now is the right way to go. Get the fleets to understand the technology, use it, and then we'll iterate. I think we're still in the very early days of electrifying commercial vehicles right now.
Have you looked to any type of propulsion systems for trailers yet to try to allow for, additional mileage for trucks that don't have it? Do you have a set of propulsion electric rim or axles as well?
Yeah, sorry, I sort of explained that carefully. So the first motors we have here, we call that EHub 80 for 80 kilowatts per wheel. They're full motors. So we can use them as a generator, and we can use that as a propulsion device where you put the electrons back into the wheels and you drive the trailer forward. Now, you're not going to push the tractor from a stop at a red light, right? But when you're in motion, it's going to help put the tractor back into efficiency zones. So that's a technology we've tried and tested. It's not fully ready for commercial rollout right now, but we know that's going to be a way to help the ROI of fleets over time.
Yeah, I remember seeing the design when you at ACT you had a cross cut of that electric rim, and it was very impressive. And I do think that's going to be the way to, or a lot of these trucks, as you have alternative fuels and batteries, that you can actually get that freight from one into the other. And then, of course, the stopping aspect of it. Have you seen from the miles that you put on these trailers, have they described less brake use or anything, or is that about the same that you would normally find?
We're going to see a bit less use, but when you have fleets, typically they don't measure that very carefully either. But the success for me is when the driver's using it and it's transparent to him. It's like if they don't have to take special care of it, they come back, they're super happy because it was silent during the whole delivery. That's where the wins are. It's like you want the fleet manager to be able to pull this trailer out of the lot and not have to worry, is this an electric trailer? Is this a diesel trailer? What am I doing here? He's just grabbing one and putting it on a standard route. And that's really where the successes are. So that's why it was key for us to roll these out with key customers, and it's the iteration now based on their feedback is going to be great.
Well, thank you so much for spotlighting that. It's such a unique thing. I mean, it's one of the things that we like to do on the podcast is kind of bring in unique use cases for electrification, because we could talk about F-150 Lightnings and Teslas all day, but the electrification of generic, products and fleets and boats and aircraft and trailers and, reefers, all these things are kind of such a unique addition to the market with this new evolving technology. So thank you so much for joining us and spotlighting that product. If people want more information, they can obviously Google Conmet and the Vector eCool trailer solution and kind of see a little bit more about that. And we'll also put some information in the description here. So
Well,
thank
thanks
you
a
so
lot. I
much.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, next time you're on the road, you're looking at trailers when you're going down. You'll never look at them the same way. You'll start
Absolutely.
looking at the reefer unit and how it works, and they're all different. They all look like boxes down the road, but they're all very different when you look at it. And some are now having in-wheel motors as well.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
awesome.
Great job.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates. Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to be notified when we post more episodes like this one. See you then.